Hello there and welcome to CFO Conversations. I'm your host, Paula Kensington, and I have the great pleasure of welcoming back Michael Joffe into the studio with me today.
Thank you, Paula.
So today we are having a conversation about data and insights, and I know we've had a number of conversations about this subject, but we haven't solved it yet. And what I actually came across a couple of weeks ago was that wisdom's all about questions and not about the answers, so maybe there isn't an answer. But where does data sit in terms of the finance function? We've spoken about it before, finance being the custodian, but I don't know whether they know how to.
Yeah, sure. Look, data's a passion of mine. It always has been. Data connected with technology has always been a passion of mine. I'm not quite sure how I stumbled into that space, but I'm glad I did. But I think my observation over time is I've worked for some large organisations where for a period of time, data and insights was something that was outsourced. We had any number of consultants come through the organisation, and it was their job to turn data into insights. Yeah. But of course, with that came a very significant price tag, but also very significant risk, because IP was walking out the door as soon as that particular engagement ended or that consulting firm was moved on. And so senior leadership, realising the significance of data and insights for the business, would look to an internal function to take on responsibility. And of course, as data and insights tends to begin with numbers, finance was the place to go. Yeah. The question has always been, does the finance function have the capability and the wherewithal to take that responsibility on at any point in time, whether it be capacity, whether it be the skills required, and that's the real challenge.
Yeah, and again, I think it goes back to the size of the business and the capacity and the capability of the finance team, because it's moving away from the cyclical nature and reporting nature, and maybe it's into that sort of what was called FP&A space around insights. But there's so many businesses out there. As a consumer, I can see that they're not tapping into any data that they've got because they're not understanding my patterns and behaviours or selling to me. It amazes me how many businesses aren't doing it.
But perhaps not tapping into that data, not because they don't want to, but because they don't know how to, or they're so lost in the data. I mean, data's very broad. It's not just financial, it's non-financial, it's a whole plethora of information. People are wanting to harness that more and more, but are struggling with the how. Yeah. How do we do that? Yeah. And what sort of skills do we require in our workforce and in whether it be the finance function or a dedicated data and insights team to be able to manage that and wrestle all of that information and simplify it.
Yeah, and that's right. And simplicity is so difficult and expensive to get. One of the hardest things, coming from a technology background, keeping it simple was the hardest thing to do. It's an interesting concern. I think if people are thinking about their relevancy as a finance leader, they should definitely be getting into that more insightful data space.
Yeah, and I do think you mentioned FP&A before. I think those who have really performed in that FP&A space, that business intelligence space, it's a natural next step or progression into bigger data and insights. Yeah. So I think that there is a body within finance that is very equipped to take that step. But certainly it's something that we don't train people for necessarily. There's not a how to take reams and reams of data and multiple million data points and turn it into something that you can feed to the business.
And I think the challenge then, most businesses I've worked in that had that FP&A have been of a sizable nature that they could afford to have another team alongside finance. A lot of businesses that I've worked for here in Australia would not have the budgets for an FP&A team. So if you're a small finance team, and you were talking about it in another conversation, if you're a small finance team, you're going to have to somehow get good at that simultaneously until the machines catch up to do some of our transactional work. It's a real dilemma.
It is.
And something we could talk about it all day. So thank you for just touching on that subject, Michael. We'll leave it there.